My son delivered the news over tea on a Tuesday morning. "You'll need to move out by summer," he said, not looking up from his phone. His voice was casual, like he was commenting on the weather. I set my cup down carefully, the porcelain making a soft click against the saucer. My hands didn't shake. I'd learned long ago that staying calm was the only way to survive conversations that tried to break you. "I see," I said quietly. He finally glanced up, surprise flickering across his face. He'd expected tears, maybe arguments. Instead, I nodded and took another sip of tea. The silence stretched between us like a wire pulled too tight. "It's just practical, Mom," he added, his tone defensive now. "The apartment's worth a lot. I could rent it out properly." I didn't ask why he thought it was his to decide. I didn't ask when my home had become his investment. I just watched him scroll through his phone, already moved on to the next thing, and wondered why he was so certain he had the right. After he left, I walked through the apartment alone. My footsteps echoed differently somehow, like the walls were listening. The hardwood floors bore scratches from 40 years of furniture being moved, rearranged, lived around. There was the gouge near the kitchen, where I'd dropped a cast-iron pan the week my husband died. The patched spot on the living room wall where my son had thrown a baseball at age 7. I ran my fingers along the windowsill I'd repainted every 5 years, the same soft cream color my husband had chosen when we first moved in. The bathroom tiles I'd scrubbed on my hands and knees, the closet door that still stuck in humid weather, the radiator that clanked like an old friend every winter morning. This wasn't just a house, it was every moment that had shaped me. Could something this rooted really be taken away? The question sat heavy in my chest as evening light slanted through the western windows, golden and familiar. Thursday afternoon, I found my neighbor struggling with grocery bags in the hallway. Mrs. Abernathy was 78 and stubborn as stone. "Let me help," I said, reaching for the heavier bags before she could protest. We climbed the stairs together slowly, her breathing labored. At her door, she tried to press a $5 bill into my hand. "Please, you saved my hip." I closed her fingers back around the money. "Neighbors don't charge neighbors," I said gently. She smiled, her eyes watering slightly. "You're a good soul," she whispered. I thought about that as I returned to my own apartment. I'd spent my whole life being good, being kind, being the person who helped without asking for anything back. It was the only way I knew how to be. But standing in my kitchen, looking at the eviction notice my son had left on the counter, I wondered, would kindness matter when power was involved? My sister called Friday evening. "I heard about the apartment situation," she said, her voice careful. We'd never been close, but family news traveled fast. "Don't fight him," she warned. "You'll lose. He's the legal owner now, has been since Dad's estate was settled. You're just a tenant, technically." The word stung. Tenant. In the home I'd lived in for 4 decades. "Even if you had some old paperwork," she continued, "family courts don't care about that stuff. He's your son. They'll side with him." Doubt crept into my mind like cold water. Was resistance even possible? I'd never been the fighting type. I'd survived my husband's death, raised my son alone, worked 2 jobs to keep this roof over our heads. But I'd survived by bending, by adapting, by accepting what I couldn't change. Fighting felt foreign, dangerous. "Just make it easy on yourself," my sister said before hanging up. "Find a nice senior apartment. Start fresh." But I didn't want fresh. I wanted home. Saturday morning, I decided to clean out the hall closet. It was something I'd been avoiding for years, packed with boxes and old coats and things I couldn't quite throw away. On the top shelf, buried under winter blankets, I found a heavy manila envelope. My husband's handwriting on the front, neat and precise. "Lease. Original." My heart stuttered. I pulled it down, dust coating my fingers. The envelope was sealed with old yellowed tape, the kind that had dried out and cracked at the edges. I stood there in the hallway, holding it, feeling its weight. Inside could be nothing. Old tax documents, maybe. Something expired and useless. Or it could be something else. Something that mattered. But what if it didn't matter? What if my sister was right and old papers changed nothing? I set the envelope on the kitchen table and made myself tea. It sat there all afternoon while I stared at it, unopened. What's inside, I wondered, and does it still matter? The building caretaker appeared at my door Sunday afternoon. His name was Mr. Brennan, a quiet man who'd worked here for 15 years. "Afternoon, ma'am," he said, holding a toolbox. "Just checking the radiators before winter." I let him in, and he worked methodically, testing valves and making notes. When he finished, he stood in my living room, looking around with an expression I couldn't read. "How long have you lived here?" he asked casually. 42 years, I replied. "Since 1982. He nodded slowly, his eyes moving to the photographs on my mantel, the worn couch, the familiar clutter of a long life lived in one place. "That's a good long time," he said quietly. "Must have seen a lot of changes." "I have," I agreed. He lingered at the door, like he wanted to say something more. But instead, he just tipped his head and left. I watched him through the window as he crossed the courtyard below, and I wondered, why does this person care now? My son returned Monday with a contractor. They walked through the apartment while I sat in the kitchen, listening to their voices in the other rooms. "We'll knock out this wall," my son said excitedly. "Open concept, modern kitchen, new appliances. The whole place needs updating." The contractor murmured agreement. "Could get top dollar for a renovation like this. Great location." They spoke about my home like I wasn't there, like I was already gone. My son appeared in the kitchen doorway, flushed with plans. "This could be really something, Mom. You'll see. It's the right move." He talked about paint colors and fixtures and rental rates. He talked about everything except where I would go. The contractor took measurements. My son took photos. They discussed timelines and budgets and return on investment. He acted like ownership was settled, like summer was simply a formality we were waiting out. But I kept thinking, on what authority? Where was the document that made this his choice to make? Tuesday evening, I flipped the calendar page. May disappeared, June appeared. Summer wasn't some distant concept anymore. It was 8 weeks away. Then 6, then less. I stared at the empty boxes on the calendar where my future should have been and felt time pressing down like a weight on my chest. The apartment felt different now. Temporary somehow. I caught myself looking at things like I was already saying goodbye. The view from the bedroom window. The morning light in the kitchen. The creaky third step on the stairs. My son called with the name of a moving company. "They're good," he assured me. "They'll handle everything. I'll even pay for it." His generosity felt like a knife wrapped in kindness. I thanked him and hung up. The manila envelope still sat on my kitchen table, unopened. Time pressure was real. The countdown had begun. And I still didn't know. What happens when the clock runs out? Wednesday afternoon, I finally opened the envelope. My hands trembled as I broke the old seal, the paper crackling as I unfolded the documents inside. The lease was thick, printed on heavy paper that had yellowed with age. The language was dense, full of legal terms I didn't understand. Whereas and hereby and in perpetuity. I read slowly, my reading glasses sliding down my nose. Most of it was standard, I thought. Rental terms, payment schedules, maintenance responsibilities. But then, near the bottom of page 3, one sentence stood out. It was underlined in my husband's careful hand. "Tenancy shall remain in effect for the natural life of the signed tenant, unless voluntarily surrendered in writing." I read it again, and again. My heart beat faster. Did that mean what I thought it meant? Or was I misunderstanding, grasping at hope where there was none? The words swam before my eyes. Is this hope or confusion? I didn't know enough about legal language to be sure. I needed help. But who could I trust? Thursday morning, Mr. Brennan knocked on my door again. "Morning, ma'am, just following up on that radiator." But when I let him in, he didn't go to the radiator. Instead, he stood in my kitchen, his eyes falling on the lease spread across my table. "That's old paper," he observed quietly. I nodded, suddenly protective. "Did anyone ever explain your tenancy terms to you?" he asked. The question was so specific, so pointed, that I froze. "No," I admitted. "My husband handled all that. After he died, my son took over the building management. I just stayed." Mr. Brennan picked up the lease carefully, like it was something precious. His eyes scanned the pages and I saw recognition flash across his face. "This is important," he said quietly. "More important than you know." He set it down gently. "Do you understand what this means?" I shook my head. "Not entirely." He looked at me with something like respect. "You should," he said. Then he left, leaving me with more questions than before. What was never explained and why? My sister called again Friday, her voice sharp. I heard you're looking at old paperwork, she said. Someone had been talking, probably my son. You're wasting your time. Old papers don't beat family. No judge is going to side with some ancient lease over a son's legal ownership. Her words hit hard because part of me believed her. What did I know about legal battles? I'd spent my whole life avoiding conflict, choosing peace over justice. He's trying to help you? My sister insisted. A smaller place would be easier. You don't need all that space. But it wasn't about space. It was about the wall where I'd marked my son's height every birthday. The floor where I'd taught him to tie his shoes. The window where I'd waited for my husband to come home before he stopped coming home at all. Emotional conflict deepened inside me, pulling in two directions. Family versus truth. Love versus justice. Which wins when they stand on opposite sides? The weekend passed slowly. I waited for Mr. Brennan to appear again, but he didn't. Monday came and went. Tuesday, nothing. By Wednesday, I was convinced I'd imagined the whole conversation. Maybe my sister was right. Maybe I was a desperate old woman clinging to false hope. I walked past his maintenance office 3 times, but it was always locked, dark. The other tenants hadn't seen him either. He's probably on vacation, Mrs. Abernathy suggested. But something felt wrong. Mr. Brennan had looked at that lease like it mattered, like it meant something, and then he'd vanished. Unease replaced hope, settling into my stomach like a stone. Had I scared him off by showing him the document? Had my son somehow found out and warned him away? The questions spiraled through my mind at night when I couldn't sleep. The manila envelope sat on my table like an accusation, and I wondered, was the help imagined? Thursday morning, I found a note slipped under my door. The handwriting was unfamiliar, small and precise. Bring the lease tomorrow. 10 a.m., 1247 Oakwood Avenue. Don't tell your son. My hands shook as I read it again. There was no signature, no explanation, just an address and a warning. The secrecy raised every alarm in my mind. This could be a trap. It could be someone trying to take advantage of a confused old woman, or it could be the help I desperately needed. I looked up the address online. It was a small office building downtown, home to various professionals, lawyers, accountants, consultants, nothing obviously dangerous. But the note's insistence that I keep this from my son troubled me. Why the secrecy? What was really happening here? I held the note up to the light, looking for clues. Found none. Just those stark instructions and the weight of a decision I had to make. Who was really involved now? And what would happen if I went? Friday morning, I took the bus downtown. The address led me to a modest 3-story building with a discreet entrance. Inside, the directory listed various offices, but one caught my eye. Tenancy Rights Archive and Preservation. 3rd floor. My legs felt weak climbing the stairs. The hallway was quiet, carpeted in dark blue, with old-fashioned sconces on the walls. I found the office at the end of the hall. The door was plain wood with frosted glass, professional but understated. This wasn't some fly-by-night operation. This was established, official. Bigger than I'd expected. I stood outside, clutching my envelope, trying to steady my breathing. Through the frosted glass, I could see shapes moving, hear the soft murmur of voices. A phone rang somewhere inside. The normalcy of it was almost comforting. I raised my hand to knock, then hesitated. Once I walked through this door, there was no taking it back. Whatever happened next would change things. The question echoed in my mind. What authority lives here? Inside, the waiting room was small but neat. Chairs lined one wall. A coffee table held magazines about housing rights and tenant protection. A young receptionist looked up and smiled. Mrs. Callahan? I nodded, surprised she knew my name. Please have a seat. Someone will be with you shortly. I sat clutching the lease against my chest like armor. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. 5 minutes passed, then 10. My palms were sweating. Other people came and went, looking stressed or relieved or determined. All of them carried papers, documents, evidence of lives tangled in legal complications. Was I one of them now? The vulnerability peaked as I sat there, feeling small and foolish. What if this was all for nothing? What if I'd misunderstood everything, built up false hope based on one sentence I didn't fully comprehend? The receptionist kept glancing at me with sympathy, which somehow made it worse. I wanted to run. I wanted to forget this whole thing. But I stayed, frozen in that chair, wondering, What if this is a mistake? The office door opened. Mr. Brennan stepped out, but he wasn't wearing his usual maintenance clothes. Instead, he wore a pressed suit and tie, his gray hair neatly combed. He looked professional, authoritative, completely different. "Mrs. Callahan," he said warmly. "Thank you for coming. Please, follow me." I stood on shaking legs and followed him into a private office. It was lined with filing cabinets and bookshelves, filled with what looked like hundreds of old documents. "I apologize for the secrecy," he said, gesturing to a chair. "But I needed to be sure before bringing you here." "Sure of what?" I managed to ask. He sat across from me, his expression kind but serious. "That you had what I thought you had." His identity was shifting before my eyes. Not just a caretaker, something more, someone with purpose and knowledge and access to resources I didn't understand. "Who are you?" I whispered. He smiled gently. "Someone who helps people like you, someone who knows what that lease means." Mr. Brennan took the lease from my trembling hands and spread it carefully on his desk. "This," he said, pointing to the underlined sentence, "is a rare clause. Very rare. It was common in the 1970s and early 80s for certain rent-controlled buildings." He explained that when the building was converted to condominiums in 1979, some original tenants negotiated lifetime tenancy protections. "Your husband was smart," Mr. Brennan said. "He made sure you'd always have a home." I felt validation beginning to bloom in my chest, warm and unfamiliar. "So I can't be evicted?" I asked carefully. "Not unless you voluntarily surrender your tenancy in writing," he confirmed. "This lease supersedes ownership changes. It's binding." The relief was so intense I felt dizzy, but then doubt crept back in. "My son owns the building now," I said. "Won't that change things?" Mr. Brennan shook his head. "Ownership transfers don't void existing lease agreements, especially not ones like this." He looked at me seriously. "The question is, how powerful is this clause, and are you prepared to enforce it?" Mr. Brennan leaned back in his chair, his expression growing more serious. "I need to warn you about something," he said carefully. "Your son may not know about this clause. The building changed hands several times since your husband's death. These old protections sometimes get overlooked in the paperwork." He paused. "Or he may know and is hoping you don't." The words hit me like cold water. My own son, banking on my ignorance. "Either way," Mr. Brennan continued, "when you present this lease, it will change your relationship. There's no going back from that." Moral tension surfaced in the quiet office. This wasn't just about property rights anymore. This was about trust, about family, about the fragile bond between mother and son. "What if he fights it?" I asked. "What if he hates me for this?" Mr. Brennan's expression softened. "That's something only you can weigh. But I'll tell you this, you have the right to stay. The question is whether you'll claim it." The office felt smaller suddenly, the weight of the decision pressing down. What happens when truth confronts family? Mr. Brennan read the clause aloud slowly and clearly, making sure I understood every word. "Tenancy shall remain in effect for the natural life of the signed tenant, Mrs. Dorothy Callahan, unless voluntarily surrendered in writing by said tenant. This covenant runs with the land and binds all future owners." Undeniable clarity washed over me. There was no ambiguity here, no room for interpretation. My husband had protected me, even after death. "This means," I said carefully, "that I can stay as long as I live. No one can make me leave." "Exactly," Mr. Brennan confirmed. "Not your son, not any future owner. Only you can end this tenancy, and only by your own written choice." I felt tears building behind my eyes. For weeks I'd felt powerless, pushed toward a future I didn't want, and all this time the power had been mine. "But can this be enforced?" I asked. "If my son refuses to accept it?" Mr. Brennan nodded firmly. "It's a legal document, properly executed and recorded. Any court would uphold it." Mr. Brennan stood and walked to one of his filing cabinets. "Let me explain what I do here," he said, pulling out folders. "I work with the Tenancy Rights Archive. We locate and preserve historic lease protections that often get lost when buildings change ownership." He showed me files of similar cases, dozens of elderly tenants who'd been pushed out of their homes, unaware they had legal protections. "When I came to check your radiator," he explained, "I recognized your address. I'd seen the building's conversion records years ago and knew there were protected tenancies. I just didn't know if you were one of them." The benefactor's purpose became clear. He wasn't just a caretaker. He was a guardian of rights that others had forgotten or tried to bury. "I help people find what they've lost," he said simply, "or what was hidden from them." I looked at the files, at all those lives saved by pieces of paper. "What comes next?" I asked quietly. He met my eyes. "That depends on whether you want conflict or justice, or both." "I think it's time to invite your son here," Mr. Brennan said gently. "Let him see the lease, understand the situation, give him a chance to respond with dignity." My stomach clenched. "And if he doesn't?" "Then we take legal steps," he said calmly. "But let's try conversation first." That afternoon I called my son. "I need you to meet me somewhere tomorrow," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's about the apartment." He sighed, annoyed. "Mom, I don't have time for drama." "It's not drama," I interrupted. "It's important, please." Something in my tone must have convinced him. He agreed reluctantly. When I hung up, my hands were shaking. Mr. Brennan had given me the address to share. Tomorrow, my son would walk into that office confident he held all the power. And I would show him otherwise. Confrontation was imminent. The thought terrified me. I'd spent my whole life avoiding conflict with my son, smoothing over disagreements, accepting his decisions. But this was different. This was my home. This was my life. Would he listen, or would he resist? My son arrived at the office looking irritated and confused. "What is this place?" he demanded, looking around the waiting room. "Why are we here?" I didn't answer. I just led him to Mr. Brennan's office. Mr. Brennan stood, extending his hand professionally. "Mr. Callahan, thank you for coming." My son ignored the handshake. "I don't understand what's going on." "Please, sit," Mr. Brennan said calmly. He placed the lease on the desk between us. "Your mother asked me to review this document. I think you should read it." My son glanced at it dismissively. "What is this? Some old rental agreement?" "This doesn't change anything." "Read it," I said quietly. Something in my voice made him stop. He picked up the lease, his eyes scanning the pages quickly at first, then slower. I watched his face change, confusion, then comprehension, then something harder to read. He reached the underlined clause. Silence filled the office as he read it once, twice, 3 times. Power visibly shifted in that moment. His certainty crumbled. "This can't be legal," he said finally, but his voice was weak. "How will he respond?" Mr. Brennan pulled out another document, official and stamped. "This is a verification from the county recorder's office," he said. "The lease is properly recorded and legally binding." He slid it across the desk. "An attorney has also reviewed it. Would you like to see that opinion?" My son stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "I own the building," he said, but it sounded like a question now. "You do," Mr. Brennan agreed. "But ownership doesn't void existing tenancy agreements. Your mother has the legal right to remain in her apartment for as long as she lives, unless she chooses to leave in writing." Justice was sealed in that moment, confirmed by official documents and legal authority. My son looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in weeks. "You knew about this?" he asked. "I just found it," I said honestly. "Dad protected me. I didn't understand until now." He slumped in his chair, all his plans collapsing around him. "So what happens now?" The question hung between us, heavy with implications. What will the son say now? I took a deep breath. This was the moment I'd been dreading and preparing for in equal measure. "What happens now is up to you," I said quietly. "I'm not leaving. That apartment is my home, and I have the right to stay." My son's jaw tightened. I could see him struggling, anger and embarrassment warring on his face. "But," I continued, and his eyes snapped to mine, "I don't want to fight you. I don't want lawyers and courts and family torn apart over this." I leaned forward. "I'm your mother. That apartment is where I raised you, where your father and I built our life. I'm asking you to respect that, to let me live out my days in peace." The choice was his now. He could push this, make it ugly, drag us both through legal battles that would poison everything between us. Or he could accept the truth and find another path. Moral strength peaked in my calm words, in my refusal to apologize for claiming what was mine while still offering reconciliation. "I'm holding my boundaries," I said, "but I'm leaving the door open for us to stay family." My son left that office without a word. For 3 days, I didn't hear from him. I returned to my apartment, unchanged and unthreatened by summer's approach. I walked through rooms that were still mine, touched walls that would shelter me as long as I lived. The relief was profound. On the fourth day, my son called. "I'm not happy about this," he said bluntly. "But I understand." It wasn't an apology, but it was acceptance. We talked awkwardly about boundaries and respect and starting over. It would take time. The following week, Mrs. Abernathy knocked on my door, trembling. "My grandson says I need to move to a nursing home," she whispered. "He says I can't stay here." I thought of my lease, of Mr. Brennan, of the archive that had saved me. "Let me make a call," I said gently. Kindness completed the circle. I'd been helped, and now I could help others. Truth had protected the gentle. I'd learned that kindness doesn't weaken you, doesn't make you a victim. It endures. It survives. It fights when it must, and it wins. Have you ever stayed calm when you could have fought? Share what this story reminded you of.